Now, Alec Lace is with us. He's the author of Class Fatherhood, and he offers advice and wisdom from high-profile dads. And he hosts his own podcast that is extraordinarily successful. I know because I went on his podcast. It's called Class Fatherhood, and he's got a brand new book out now. And by the way, if we ever needed it, this is the time. The book again is Class Fatherhood, Advice and Wisdom from High-Profile Dads. I got to admit, Alec, I was a little surprised that I was quoted in the book.
Well, listen, it was an honor to have you on the podcast and in the book. But let me start this way, Sean. I've been doing a lot of media hits for the book. The left-wing mainstream media will not allow me to come on, talk about the book, First Class Fatherhood, or the Fatherless Crisis that we got going on. And one of the emails I received directly from the publicist was said from the mainstream media, we will never, ever write about or feature a book that has Sean Hannity and Eric Trump in it. And this is why we got to make First Class Fatherhood a national bestseller, Sean. It opened up on Amazon, #1 in multiple categories. But we got to send a message. We got to punch back against this fatherless crisis and strengthen these nuclear family units in our country. Send a message. Let them know we're serious about this. Because what is the point, Sean? What is the point of solving any other social issue in this country if we're not going to strengthen our nuclear families?
You know, look, I think both fathers and mothers are vitally important. I really do. And you know, I know maybe it's going to sound a little old-fashioned. In many ways, my experience has been, my observation in life has been, is usually moms and dads offer and provide very different roles. And usually it's complementary. If it works out right, it's very complementary. I will admit that I was a helicopter parent. And meanwhile, as a kid myself, you know, my parents had no idea where I was at any point of the day or night. They knew that I worked even when I was 12 years old, I was working in restaurants Friday, Saturday, Sunday night till 2 and 3 in the morning. And they were happy that I was a worker. So it's just a very different time. You don't let your kids out of your sight like we used to, like we were growing up. But it's the single most important job anyone will ever have in life, isn't it?
100%. And although the role of the father has changed over time, it's no less important, Sean. And just I was like you. I mean, back in the day, if I ever threw a brick through a window, I would rather the police catch me before my father ever got me. That threat of, hey, wait till your father gets home was a real threat. And a lot of kids that are growing up without a father in the home today, they don't have that threat. We see the crime levels rising all over the country, and so much of it, the teenage pregnancy, teenage drug use. Governor DeSantis pointed this out down in Florida with his new fatherhood bill. I pray to God more states will follow through with that. But he pointed out all those statistics, Sean. They are devastating our society. We got to get more men involved. And listen, the family court system ain't doing no justice either. It is pushing so many good dads out of their kids' lives who are fighting. They're getting financially strapped. They're getting humiliated just to try to fight for a piece of time with their children. So something's got to be done there, and we got to get dads to get back into their kids' lives.
You know, it's such an important thing, even if you do little things with your kids. And the problem for most dads, I find, is, you know, men, let's go back to toxic masculinity here, because that's how this will be interpreted by some people. You know, but you go back, I feel as a father that it's my responsibility to take care of my kids and provide for my kids and my family. And I don't know, maybe that's the hunter-gatherer in me. But I do know that most dads that I know in my life, they feel the same way. And they always have this pressure in the back of their mind. Are they saving enough money for college? Are they providing their kids with the best education? Are they getting their kids to church often enough? Do they talk about God often enough? You know, are they instilling the right values in their kids? You know, when do you push? When do you not push? What's the best way to punish kids if they act up? You know, if they tell you a lie and you know they're lying. I used to tell my kids, stop insulting my intelligence. You're not good at it. And even to this day, they can't pull it off on their dad. I'm too streetwise for them. But anyway, you know, what do we do without, you know, good moms and dads, people that are dedicated to raising the best children we can, with the idea that they're really God's children? And the word education means to bring forth from within. That means that God put talent in them. How do we bring it out of them?
Well, Sean, we've taken our Heavenly Father out of society, and we've taken the Father out of the home, so that's why we're seeing kindergarten kids being taught about sexual orientation in school. I mean, it's disgraceful what's happened, but when you pull the family units apart, they have a direct line right to your kids. And becoming a father, Sean, you know, listen, it makes you a better man, it makes you a better person. One of the dads in First Class Fatherhood, the book, and I had on the podcast, was Dana White, the UFC president, and he said, you know, everyone asks him about his legacy, but he said at the end of the day, when life's over and I'm laying there in that box, the only legacy, the only thing that truly matters is what my kids are going to get up there and say about me. That's the only legacy that really matters, Sean, at the end of the day.
Dana White, who I love the most. Give me some of the best examples of advice other people gave you for the book. I mean, I was flattered that you even put me in there, but, you know, tell me more about what other people said that really struck you or stuck out to you.
Well, one thing as far as when it comes to balance in your life, Kurt Warner, the Super Bowl MVP, they just did a movie about his life story. He said he learned a long time ago that balance doesn't necessarily mean equal, where you can't give 8 hours a day to your wife, 8 hours a day to your job, and 8 hours a day to your kids. But when you're at your job, you have to be 100% there at your job. A lot of times we're at the job, Sean, and our mind is at home with our family and the bills and the house and the dog. And then when we're home with the family having dinner, our mind is at the job and all the things we got to do there. So we got to stay present and stay focused. So Kurt Warner, I think, nailed it with that. But so many other ones like Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, he talked about, and don't be afraid to learn from other dads. Don't be afraid to listen to podcasts like First Class Fatherhood or pick up the book First Class Fatherhood and listen to other dads. Guys have been there before you. Success leaves a blueprint. And no matter what stage you are in your life, if you're a new dad, about to be father, if you're a stepdad, a single dad, you adopted a kid, everything's covered in the book, Sean. So somebody has been there. Someone's done this before you. You can always look and learn. Take something that you want from them and leave the rest.
You know, one of the things that I do for my staff, and I felt if I made one mistake, I probably was on the road too much when my kids, especially when they were young. And then I made a very conscious decision to get off the road. And then I was with them every weekend because of my work hours. It was impossible for me. I do a radio show when they're out of school and doing their homework and eating dinner. And by the time I would get home, hopefully they'd be asleep. If they were awake, it was usually a problem. And I don't regret working hard because I was doing it to share everything I have with them, which is what I think you're supposed to do. But then when I made the decision to free up my weekends, it was, I think, one of the best decisions of my life. For example, I'll look at Linda. Linda is free to work from home any day she wants. Linda, is that true or false?
It is indeed.
And anybody on my staff that has a new child, I always, if there's any way possible, I let them work remote because, look, I can find out, I know in seconds if somebody's doing their job or not. It's not even complicated to figure out if they're really focused on doing their work or not doing their work. But if they need to be home with their young children, I want them home with their young children, and I try to facilitate that.
Yeah, it's so important, Sean. And I'll tell you what, one thing that I do stress in the book, First Class Fatherhood, a lot is I really call on all dads to become ambassadors for fatherhood. I really think that we need to encourage the about-to-be dads. We need to encourage our young dads. Too many dads jump on this bandwagon of the doom and gloom, and they're warning these new guys, oh, just wait until you don't get any sleep. Just wait till you have no sex life anymore. Just wait till you have no social life. And I say, stop doing that. You don't need to scare these guys. Tell them the truth about the better man you've become.
Well, there's a little bit of truth to some of what you just said, but I'm not going down that road. But look, it's the toughest job you're ever going to have. It's also can be at times the most frustrating, but also the most rewarding. There's nothing, you know, my son pulled something off this week that was just dazzled me. And I couldn't have been more proud of him. My daughter also dazzles me on a regular basis. I'm amazed at how independent they are, and I wanted to make them independent. And even though I had this helicopter protective barrier around them, they didn't really know what I was doing. You know, if they weren't with me, maybe they had their tutors or their study session or whatever it happened to be. And I got them both into sports, which took up a lot of their time, and it was a year-round sport, which I liked. This way, they weren't hanging out with their dopey friends every day, because I think that's where a lot of trouble in my life, you know, came from hanging out in the streets with my buddies. And usually there was never any adult supervision. And, I became fairly incorrigible, and I'd have to admit things that I really wouldn't want to admit that I did as a kid that I regret.
Well, Sean, I remember having this conversation with you on the podcast when you came on. And if you remember, I'm a recovering alcoholic myself, an addict, and it's something that I really worry about with my kids. I know you talked about it with your kids, and my father died from cirrhosis. I just lost one of my brothers 2 weeks ago. The day before the book launched, my brother died of cirrhosis of the liver. So alcohol has destroyed so much of my family, and it's a serious thing with me. There's plenty of dads that I interviewed on the podcast and in the book that are recoverers that talk about their experience with it. So that's in there as well. It's a serious thing. You know, more people under 65 years old died from alcohol, Sean, last year than from COVID-19. Alcohol is a serious issue. It's not talked about enough, but we look at it as such a joyful, celebratory thing. It's taking and just crushing so many lives in this country.
That, fentanyl, opioids, it's all garbage. Anyway, Alec Lace, check out his brand new book. It's called First Class Fatherhood, Advice and Wisdom from High-Profile Dads. He also hosts his own podcast, First Class Fatherhood, and we'll put a link on Hannity.com. You can get the book in bookstores everywhere, Amazon.com. Hannity.com, and good to catch up with you, Alec. Thanks so much. I appreciate the shout out. I was a little surprised, but I was very grateful. Thank you, sir.
Sean, you're a first class father all the way. Thanks for having me on.
God bless you.